Hello, everyone. This is Evren Ozkaya. I am once again with you in the Supply Chain Visit for Pharma podcast. Today, I have a very valuable guest, Steve Chakrabarty, for most recently with Beckett Dickinson as the Director of Business Process and Technology. Welcome, Steve.
Hey everyone, thanks. Nice for it's very nice to join in this podcast. Thanks for organizing this. So let me give you a little bit about my background. All right, is when I started my career, I was in the manufacturing and operations, right, and afterwards, I moved to the IT side. Mostly, I was in the consulting side, working with big, five big six consulting, driving large scale transformations, mostly in the ERP focus us and focus areas was like supply chain and on the customer facing area. These are the two focus areas. I was doing a lot of traveling. Then finally, the opportunity came up at BD, so I joined BD. I was there almost 15 plus years, and I was fortunate enough to work in the various areas, especially in the OTC side as well as supply chain, then procurement and finance areas. So as part of my journey or the experience, I was wearing multiple hats, right? Working with the businesses as well as IT side, driving continuous improvement, digital transformations, as well as driving some strategic initiatives like M&A integrations, as also improving cash flow, things like that. And recently I left BD in 24, and right now I am kind of doing some advisory consulting roles, especially in the digital transformation, M&As, is and in those areas. Primary focus in the medtech and life sciences area.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So you also are heavily involved in the academia, as far as I know. You are in the advisory board of Rutgers Business School in the
Yes.
Masters of Supply Chain Analytics program. So yeah, your contributions are very welcome. For especially like growing the next generation of talent and the leaders in our field. So Steve, we normally have no one topic when it comes to supply chain, because supply chains are complex animals, right? There's the
Yes.
demand side, there's the supply side, there is the new product introductions, there's the production planning, manufacturing, collaboration with suppliers, so many different topics. But today, I think for the first time, we are going a little deeper into the financial aspects of supply chain, and
Mm-hmm.
namely the cash flow. There's the saying, cash is king. Obviously you need to have enough cash in the bank to run your operations, right? Your working capital.
Yeah.
But there's this balancing equation of cash flow. There is the accounts payable with your
Yeah.
supplier, there's accounts receivable from your customers, and there's this middle portion, which is the inventory. My
Yes.
background mostly has been in managing the inventory as a supply chain strategy director previously at Sandoz. But then I, quite, didn't understand how the cash flow fully comes together, like the payables and receivables. So I know you've spent good number of days, years, and decades in the cash flow topic. Tell me why cash flow is important for life sciences companies.
Yeah, so if you look at the life sciences companies, right, and the medtech, especially, they're depending on the where they are in their journey, maturity journey, right? Um, they are generally P&L focused, right? And as they are P&L heavily P&L focused, and with the P&L, if you have a very high margin, you are generating enough cash. You don't have to focus on the balance sheet side of the equation. And the balance sheet side, three of the main focus areas where most of the your cash is trapped. One is your DSO, right? Second one is, as you mentioned, the inventory one, and the third one is the DPO side. So all these three components are very important, right? And if you look at the growth in the medtech and life sciences, right? The growth aspects, one is their organic growth and through the lot of innovations, R&Ds and things like that. And then the second thing is happening through a lot of M&As, right? They are growing crazy, like a lot of M&As, because they need those new technologies and things like that to reach out to the new customer and make an impact on the patient side of the equation. So they are trying to streamline their business segments and the operations with those things. So as the companies are growing in through a lot of acquisitions and things like that, so what have becomes really important, because they are P&L focused, they are focusing on the revenue side, consolidation of people and SG&A and all. So definitely they are doing that. Most of the areas which is kind of overlooked, right, is the balance sheet side of the equation. And think, let's take some example, or let's say your or daily COGS is, let's say, $25 million, right? And depends on margins. For simple math, let's say your gross margin is around, like, 50%. So basically, for, like, 1 days of DSO, right, is equivalent of 2 days of DPO, right? So basically, if you want to improve one, like, cash flow, so you have to reduce the DSO, reduce your inventory, and you have to improve your DPO by 2 days, right? So these equations becomes really critical, and especially the treasury, if folks are needs to look into these things, especially, like, the when major disruption happens, right? Let's say for during the COVID time, like, cash become really problematic, right? Every company was trying to look into opportunities, how to improve cash flow. And you have to continually invest in the R&D side of the equations, right? Or other transformation initiatives going on, you have to deploy cash, right? So do all those things, right? So still primarily focusing on the P&L side doesn't really work. So you have to be very strategic, like, how efficiently you manage the balance sheet side of the equation. Generally, if you look at the other sectors, right, the industrial manufacturing and things like that, they were pretty good in managing the balance sheet. But generally, you will see in the healthcare and life sciences, especially in the medtech areas, right, they were not very focused because of their margin level. But slowly these days, right, you will see, like, a lot of companies are started looking into the balance sheet side of the equation, so that they can continually grow, do R&D investments, right, all other things they need to do to deploy their cash, or acquire new companies, right? They do a share buyback, dividend, all those things come in play. So the CFO of the company needs to look at from all the levers, which are the things they should be doing to effectively manage the cash.
I mean, from the supply chain operations perspective, as a former, head of sales and operations planning, I know that one critical ingredient of making the sales and operations part like merge in the middle in a balanced way is the inventory level. And for branded companies like, branded pharma or medtech versus generic, there's a big difference, right?
Right.
We cannot have too much inventory tied, cash tied to inventory in the generic business, because like there's not much margins to play with. It's not creating as much cash flow, and therefore we cannot have as much inventory as we want. We need to really optimize the supply chain. So inventory becomes critical. But what you're saying is, because in the higher margin scenarios, branded pharma, branded medtech, because the margins are much better, you think that like the balance sheet has a lot of opportunities to improve, not just inventory, but also payables and receivables. So
Yes.
when I hear the cash flow and the balancing, my mind often rushes to the supplier side. Like, hey, let's wait and not pay these suppliers for another 30 days, or let's issue another ground rule saying that, look, we're extending our payables date from 90 days to 120 days, 120 days to 150 days. Is this the only play that is typical, or what else is available in terms of those levers you mentioned from the CFO office perspective? What levers we can pull to really optimize the cash flow?
So that's a very good question, what you said, right? Generally, the mindset, right, of any, like, organization, you see, like, whenever there is a conversation, hey, we got to improve our DPO. Guess what? Let's call our CPO, okay? And all the C-suite folks will be asking CPO, hey, why don't you go and tell all your suppliers, right, to increase the payment term to X number of days. Today it's 60 days, maybe make 120 days, etc. and all, right? While this may be technically true, right, if you do, and that's in a perfect world situation, right? So your environment or your ecosystem because like large pharma or like the companies are going through acquisitions and all, right? Your ecosystem needs to be very healthy and working very efficiently
Mhm.
to then you can make all those things adjustments and things, maybe it will be working, but you have to look at your back end ecosystem too on top of that, whatever you are trying to do. So definitely there are like 2 3 levers you can pull from the procurement side. One is the working with your suppliers, right, as you mentioned, extending terms and things like that, right? Making sure, the second thing is that making sure your internal processes are very healthy and working efficiently, and we can get
So can
back
you
to
can you give an example of, like, because terms and payment terms very easy, right? Like if you want to extend 60 days to 120, boom, you just gained 2 months of cash flow. But
right.
what is in the process? Like what can we do to
Yeah,
improve the
so let's
process?
talk about that, right? So whenever you are talking about large pharma, they have multiple segments, they grew through a lot of acquisitions and things like that. So now you need to look at like look at your numbers, right? First thing you got to do is you look at your do the benchmarking, benchmarking of where are you with your peers, right? When the procurement side, DPO side, right? Are you in the top quadrant or you are at the bottom? Because of over the years so many acquisitions happens, right? Where do you stand? Now the second question is, okay, acquisition happened, did we integrate all of them together in the main big companies? Because a lot of times what happens, they leave those companies to as a standalone business, right? They just consolidate the P&L as a financial statement, but they don't integrate properly, like the real consolidation, like on the supplier side, policies,
Mm,
procedures, and terms. So your parent company may be working in a with a very efficient way, like you have standardized processes and things like that, but all the newly acquired companies may not have those things, right?
mhm,
So that creates a big gap, right? When you look at your cash conversion cycle, right, pre-acquisition versus the post-acquisition, right? And then you see there are a lot of gaps. So for example, you asked me some like, can you give some example? So let's say we have one supplier, some like audit firm, right? So you said like procurement did a wonderful job, right, negotiating with the suppliers, saying that global payment term or global contract is 90 days, right? So now, did I go ahead and make sure all the newly acquired companies, because they are part of the pair, like big company, right? Big family, happy family. Are they
mhm,
also giving the same terms, right? So that is the sourcing and contracting side. You have to look at it, right? Then second thing is that okay, you have list of preferred suppliers. Are we leveraging those preferred suppliers where you have best terms, like you have established all the other things? Are we going using the same ones for the newly acquired companies, right? So that's very
mhm,
important to look at those things, right? And if those work is not done up front, you will find a big gap. And even if it sounds like a very small dollar, but when you add all those things, it kind of
mhm.
makes a big difference, right? So once you
Yeah.
pull all those things, so you put a, let's say, waterfall chart, right? For each of the areas, gap and things like that, you will find a big gap from your parent companies is and the lost all the newly acquired companies, right? So that's itself is a sourcing side of the equation. Then it comes to the purchasing side, right? Purchasing side also, like, are they following those standard processes, right? Or they are going through all the purchase orders, the terms and conditions, whatever set up in the sourcing side is fully going to the purchasing side of the house, right? Or there is a
Mhm,
disbalance because your master data, because that's now we are getting into little more details, your master data is not good or healthy enough. I have seen procurement did a wonderful job, like setting up all the contracts, but and contract is sitting there in a some like isolated some system. I don't want to mention the name of the system, but that metadata of from your contract is not properly populated in your target ERPs. So even if procurement did all the hard work doing all the negotiation, but your target ERP is maybe saying somewhere it is 60 days, somewhere it's 30 days, somewhere maybe pay immediately, things like that. So these creates a big despair, like gap.
mhm.
from your
Yeah.
original work done versus your backend system. So your master data plays a big role, making sure
Mhm.
that your master data is properly synchronized. So that's like, the sourcing side and the purchasing side and all those things are happening. Then
Mhm.
if you go to the payable side, right? Now you look at, okay, am I following the same standards, right? Like, how my like, is most of the cases, with a few exception, right, these days is like, some countries in Europe has some restriction, like, France and all, whatever the supplier invoice date says, that's the date. Even if we think like everything is digitized, even after, like, internet booms and all those things happen, a lot of places we don't have 100% digitization, like, AP solution. So what is
Mhm.
happening, a lot of things are happening with paper, PDF and things like that. People think PDF is like, scanning solution is electronic or digitized, right?
Yeah.
It is not, all right. Because there are a lot of gaps are there. So when supplier actually sends the invoice, right, and then when it shows up, there may be a couple of days gap. So now if I try to start my clock based on when I received the supplier invoice, that has to be a clean invoice, right? It should not have a lot of
Mhm.
discrepancy and things like that. So what happens is that, so your AP balance is not going to improve, because like, you are paying early, because by the time it comes to the hits your GL, it's too late. You have only couple of days, is like, on the payment side, or suppliers
Mhm.
are not invoicing before delivering your services, right? How are you doing your payment runs, right? Are you doing paying on a daily basis, or you have like, following the industry benchmark or the specific region specific, and then like, following those things, right, where you are paying
Mhm.
weekly or twice a month or once a month and things like that, right? So
Mhm.
those
Mhm.
things plays a big role. Once you add up all those things, right, how much direct debits are there, there are so many things. And I would say, to go through that level of details, right, you do need to have good analytics, right? Because without analytics, it's very difficult to find out what are the opportunities, right, or
Mhm.
inefficiency. So you
Mhm.
need to have, if you don't have analytics, right, good analytics, right, you got to start going into your transaction system and pulling the data, even if it's through the Excel and standard things, right? You can do a lot of still digging and find out like there is quite a bit of a gap. At a macro level, if your
Yeah.
weighted average term is, let's say, 65 days, or like, 60 days, your DPO should be around 60 days. There are other factors are there, but
Mhm.
sometimes it is not. And why it is not, so you have to go through those processes to find out, like, how you can improve things. So that's why
Mhm.
like these processes and steps becomes really important as part
Mhm.
of the journey, going through each stage of the process: sourcing, contracting, purchasing, as well as or accounts payable, then disbursement. Are you paying suppliers early, right? Even if like, somebody
So
complains, it's like that.
So what you're saying is like it's almost like cash flow has its own supply chain from procurement, sourcing, procurement, contracting, like setting the strategy and terms to executing, and then following the execution, checking the data on the execution to see if it matches. So there's a whole end-to-end process of procure to pay, and the result is part of the cash flow, which is accounts payable.
You
So
are
there is
correct.
this plus and minuses, of course. But when we take a step back and from like a big supply chain head or head of finance perspective, why does it matter? Like why we are talking about cash flow and how much money is tied to the working capital? Is it because we're missing out on opportunities? Is it because we cannot invest in growth opportunities or transformation initiatives? What is the so what of all this cash flow?
So that's a good question. The main thing is that depends on what is company's position, right? How much cash it is generating from the your regular operations, right? How much you need for your working capital, right? How much you are investing on R&D, right? And how much you are trying to do some other new customer acquisitions and things like that, or you are driving large scale digital transformation, which requires quite a bit of cash, right? So you have to look at all those things, right? It's not a one kind of like,
Hmm.
single answer. So depending on those situation, if you look at those things, right, everything matters. Every dollars or every cents matters. So
Hmm.
if I am so cash rich, I don't have to worry about it because my margin is so high. I don't have to go and spend so much time. Then it's perfectly fine. But
Yeah,
as like you are growing, and then the second question I would ask, why would I leave the money on the table, right?
yeah.
Why won't I invest and improve my internal processes where I can squeeze the orange further, right?
And the
And get
cost of
more money.
capital is not low, right? The cost of capital is what, like 9, 10, twelve
Yeah,
percent
yeah,
So
yes,
that, like, for every $100 million, there's $10+ million of loss that we are incurring,
yes,
or not investing into transformation. So sometimes, like, it's very, I think it's close to my heart, because when we talk with the executives, and when they're talking about the budget they have or they don't have, like, they sometimes say, like, well, we don't have the budget this year, we don't have it next year, it's all tied to this big project. But if you look at the balance sheet, you would find 100 million, $200 million sitting there, and easily you're losing, 10, 20, $30 million a year of,
yes,
annuities or interest payments, or whatnot, just because it's tied and not optimized. So that can be unlocked and invested in transformation programs to get even more efficiencies and continuous improvement in your supply
exactly,
chain. So
exactly.
that's why I think is the hidden area. If you take it as is, you will, like, oh, I don't have the budget, I don't have the cash, it's busy, turning the business around, or running the day-to-day business. But if you have an untapped potential of another 10 million, you can easily put that to good use.
Oh yes, and in fact, there are like if you are smart enough, right? Companies have done, and they uncovered those values, and some of those digitization project or continuous improvement project, it's a self-funding, right? So
Hmm.
whatever you are getting back, like let's say yes, based on my cost of capital, right? Generally, in like an S&P 500 companies, right, between 7 to 10%, as you mentioned, right? It varies
Hmm.
between that. But whereas I can invest that cash for higher opportunity where I can easily get like 20% or over that more like money, right? If I invest in the high growth area.
Hmm.
So that's why those things need to be looked into it from that angle, right? So
Yeah.
there is a lot of debate also happens, right? Okay, we have like you have payment term. If you early pay discount like 3%, 4%, and that directly hits P&L, right? And people are, as I said, like yeah. So that's why it is important, like, okay, are you extremely P&L focused, or you are looking at the balance sheet? Fine, I am
Hmm.
getting into the P&L, but if I don't pay early and I don't take the discount, right, I could invest that cash somewhere else, right? If I have a better opportunity, why do I pay early, right, and take the
Yeah.
discount? Again, it's a treasury decision, and you have to make very conscious effort to make
Hmm.
sure that you are making the right decision depending on your corporate priorities, right? What are the things you want to do? How efficiently you want to deploy the cash to generate more value and generate more money.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, one other thing, maybe less so in medical devices, but definitely also happens there a lot. But in pharma specifically, is any cash sitting in inventory is also going obsolete at some point if you're not
Yes.
managing it to the expiration date. So it's very common to write off like tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars
Yeah.
of products expiring on the in the warehouses, like without even seeing the daylight, or without going to the warehouse for distributors to be shipped. So just
Yeah.
because we don't manage it well, and we don't manage it by at the right SKU demand and supply volatility level, we are wasting so much
Yeah.
value, and those cash is basically just going down the drain, no return, it's all write-off. So that's another thing that was very shocking to me when my first job coming to pharmaceuticals and digging into the ERP systems to find out what's our safety stock, finding out that most of our safety stock are set at 2 months. Like, really? Like, there's no volatility considered, there's no supply volatility, demand volatility. Like, are we really managing everything to 2 months of stock? The answer was yes, it was like a standard normal. Well, it's not really normal. When we did the analysis, we found that two-thirds of the the SKUs, the products, we have too much inventory. 1/3 of the SKUs we have too little inventory. Very
Yes.
few percentage of SKUs we had like right about inventory level that we needed. It was like so amazing, and imagine how much safety stock is wasted and eventually obsolete and
Yeah.
losing money that way, or how much service level that we miss out on not having the right inventory level. So I think there's a whole
Yeah.
optimization story around the
Yeah.
inventory side, which can
Yeah.
relieve some cash flow.
Inventory is also like how now I was, as I was in supply chain, that was also near and dear to my heart, right? And there are a lot of work was done, and I was involved in some of them. Maybe we'll discuss other time, but definitely there are a lot of opportunities depending on the type of the business and all the things you could do, and
Mhm.
it requires a smart, thought process, as well as you need it very elegant, your backend systems, which is dynamic. Most of the times, if you look at this thing, as you correctly said, right, uh, people don't look at MRP data, right, on a regular basis based on what is happening in the market. So some of the cases, like I have seen, like many years ago, like when first time we did the ERP conversions, right, or first time data load, whatever the lead time and all those things we had set up, that's still sitting there. That is no more valid in today's environment, right?
Yeah,
It is not
yeah.
dynamically modifying it. So that's
Actually,
a separate
yeah.
discussion altogether.
See, like it reminded me one of my first aha moments in like actually working for a medtech company as a consultant many years ago, and we were like running the supply chain for a select number of product families, and then we realized that there's this particular product that's always late and there's always stocking out. And when we dig deeper into the MRP settings, we found out that somebody, I don't know who, at the beginning of the ERP setup, they set the lead time for 5 days. So system wasn't even ordering this until 5 days, until it is needed, but the lead time was more than a month. So
Yeah.
we were literally ordering it too late every single time, seeing it stock out, and then just one uncovering of the master data, quick correction of the lead time that immediately fixed the story. So yes, you are right that sometimes like we did digitize, we set it up,
Mhm.
but then we just assume that it's working fine, but needs to be constantly optimized, constantly refined.
Constantly
Data
optimized.
analysis is critical because systems are living and breathing things. They don't just stay as like constant. They shouldn't stay as constant. But you're highlighting one important aspect for which I call like the broad blocks against digital transformation. Like you need money, you need cash to invest in digitally transforming for your company to the future. But one big obstacle is that look, there is not enough cash, or we cannot have the budget. Let's optimize cash flow and uncover some hidden potential. That's one
Yes.
thing. The second area that I want to focus on with you is, and you also have some experiences helping with M&A, mergers and acquisitions, post-merger integration, but that's a shock to the system, right? When a merger happens, almost like for the next year or two or three, everything that is going on stops. Like, sorry, we don't have resources for anything else. Sorry, we don't have budget for anything else. We just need to focus on this merger and acquisition, post-merger integration, which is partly correct. But I want to ask you, is there a way to also invest digitalization, transformation, harmonization while going through that M&A work? Like, how should companies approach this?
Yeah, so again, I'm sharing my experience, and I have gone through many of those things in my past company. So you have to be very smart, right? So this is very important, right? If you are thinking that, okay, I'll have continuous M&As, right? So you cannot become like every M&A becomes a new event. Although it is a new event, right? Depend, because every businesses are different, etc. But you need
Mhm.
to have like you have to be very strategic and thinking, right? Come up with some standard templates, right? Because so that way, like if it is a large scale M&A deal, right? So then, okay, these are the procedures and processes we'll follow, right? If it is like small, like mid-size or small, these are the things we'll be following. And then if it is a tuck-in and all, like what are the things we'll be doing? The biggest challenge we face especially in medtech and life sciences area, that every time we acquire a new company, they want to try to be independent, right? And they don't want to come to one big family, coming to the same dinner table with so many brothers sitting there on the same dinner table. They want to be still operate as if like an independent company, and that becomes the biggest challenge. I think the first thing in the companies should do is that this should come from the top, right? Hey, we have some standards, right? We have to follow 80-20 rule, right? We are not saying everything will be fine, but we got to follow 80-20 rule and push the envelope so that everybody can and come into the same umbrella. And there are 20% nuances, whatever is there, that can go okay, we have to make some adjustment or fine tune and things like that, because that is really important. If we don't do that, right, you kind of, yes, fine, you acquired some company with a very strong product line, and so your revenue is going, but you are not managing your P&L effectively, you are not managing your balance sheet effectively, there are so much inefficiencies and all, it is going to bite you down the road, right? Depending
Yeah.
on your, because every time all companies cannot go straight up, right? You will have different cycle, right? It's ups and downs and things will happen, so you need
And
to
if
be
the
prepared for that.
down cycle corresponds to that big acquisition, and you're not careful about the cash flow and the
Hello?
post-merger integration, then that will be extra difficult, right?
Hello?
Yes, Steve, I think we lost a few seconds. No
Yes.
problem. We can stitch that and put it together.
Yeah,
So
sorry about that.
let me repeat my question. So, and if your cycle, down round cycle of the industry corresponds to that big acquisition, and you didn't optimize for cash flow, then the companies will realize a massive obstacle in terms of continuing to do investments, continuing to operate the business, and that's when the bad, or difficult decisions has to come in to really like course correct the company, right? That can be really risky for big acquisitions than if the down cycle comes at the same time. So yeah, I definitely can understand the highlights. But what are some of your learnings when it comes to doing the M&A the right way? Because in the pharma industry, in life sciences and medical devices, there are a lot of M&As in the past, and there will be a lot of M&As. So what are some of your key learnings for supply chain professionals as they approach to these type of projects?
Yes, from the supply chain perspective, first you have you have to look at okay, what is their go-to market strategy, right? Because sometimes depends on your product mix and how you are going to your end customers, right? Because some products may be directly, and it varies based on the region, right? Some products within the US may be going through the distributor to the hospitals and then go to the pharmacies is to the patient, right? Some of them directly going to the pharmacies and things like that. So you need to make sure when you are acquiring, you acquire depending on the business, you align you with your primary business, right? So that is the first thing, and try to do as much as integration up front, right? And set the ground rules, right? Hey, this is the way it is being done, right? Maybe the acquired company has better processes, maybe the acquiring company kind of follow the acquired companies or vice versa, but we cannot have 10 different rules, right? That becomes really problematic. So the change management is very important, right? Making sure those things are done, and then set the clear expectation, the timeline for integrations, right? Because you don't end up in a situation after 10 years or 15 years, there are it becomes a gigantic problem. There are a lot of companies that we know, right, in this space, because they left all those companies like standalone independent companies. Now they are in a big trouble. Now they cannot do large scale digital transformation. If you are trying to use next industrial evolution, right, and it is happening already, with the AI, Gen AI as like factory 4.0, right? All those things would require like a lot of good informations, right, and clean data. And if you don't have that foundation, even if you have a lot of cash, you will not be able to generate the value of AIs and next generational technology. So that is why it is important for the leadership or executives to give enough thought, right? What are the businesses is going to stay for the long term, because they may have to spin off some of the business. Don't touch those, right? You don't want to integrate those and unnecessarily spend money. But those are the ones which is going to stay in their core portfolio, right? Make sure those are integrated properly, right? And they like talk to each other, because ultimately at the end of the day, if like our customers would like to see one face, right? They don't want to talk to like 10 different ways to deal
Yeah.
with it. Like I like, let's say if I have a Verizon, right, and I have like Verizon Fios, I have Verizon like cell phones, and then other things are there. If I call, I don't want to go to 3 different places, right? I would like to go like, hey, I'm Verizon customer. I'm getting those 3 services. I would like to just get all, if I, whatever problem you figure it out at the back end, right? I do it
Hmm.
myself. So we have to think in that direction and try to see how we integrate together. It's not only from the customer side as well as the supplier side, right? Because that creates a lot of challenges, because it is important to know also, right, all the products. The one is the direct side and then the indirect sides. Indirect side, like you should try to get it as much as possible, because there is not a much of an impact in your revenue side, because it's not raw material.
Hmm.
That, right, so that you can further like integrate and bring all those things together. Maybe you don't need too many suppliers, same products or components, ends or APIs. You may be getting it
Yeah.
from 10 different places. You may consolidate and you get better terms and things like that. So
Yeah.
all those things need to be looked into beyond just traditional organizational integrations and like facility consolidations and things like that, because those things will also play a big role. How do you drive the continuous growth and things
Hmm.
like that?
So you mentioned one face to the customer. Your customers don't want to deal with you with different systems, different people, which is great, but it's only the first layer that your customers see. If you peel the onion, come back
Mhm.
and to the source, to the manufacturing, if you have 20 different manufacturing sites and all of them are operating independently with different metrics, different systems, some of them are on paper, then that's even a bigger problem, right? You might put a common facade in front of your customers and say, under this logo, we are one company, but you're actually 20 different companies independently operating to supply the different products, which becomes another big problem, which obviously we don't have time today to go dig deeper into the manufacturing side of things. But just to recap, the procurement is one area where we can optimize, which is directly contributing to cash flow. Cash flow and the balance sheet management is often, a second priority. Pharma and life sciences companies are typically focused on P&L,
Yeah.
especially when when there are not that many like margin problems or cash problems because of profitability, but it's more and more a lever that needs to be pulled so that you can uncover those hidden cash that can be reinvested for the businesses to grow. And if you don't uncover that cash and reinvest in your growth and modernization, then you're in further down in trouble and in the hole, and then your competitors are getting ahead of you. So I think
Yes.
I can summarize my learnings this way. This was really nice conversation. I'm glad we focused on the cash flow. Maybe one last, closing comments. I often do this at the end. For younger, audiences or supply chain professionals who are just
Mhm.
starting their career, they're probably like getting scared already. Like, oh my God, supply chain is so big, so complex. But we covered here one aspect of it. What will be your advice for those new graduates or early career professionals?
Yeah, for new graduate and career professional, the I would say like get as much as experience possible in the early stage. Get your hands dirty, right? Rolling up the sleeves, get into the weeds. is so that you understand all the nuances, etc. Because those things are going to pay you big dividends down the road. And once you have holistic view, right, of the end-to-end supply chain processes or worked in different areas, you would be amazed how easily you can go to any company and connect all the dots, right? And how you can drive or lead the conversation versus you are like, just focus in particular one area. So it's better to get as much as experience in different areas of supply chain and try to see like how each of them are dependent with each other and how each of those areas are impacting my financial statement, P&L, cash flow, or balance sheet. So always try to look at from that angle, right? Start with P&L, what I'm doing, and then stress it back to the even the master data side and all, right? So then you are talking to the C-level suites more intuitively, because those folks understands only P&L, cash flow, and balance sheet. They definitely they know many more other things, but their primary focus on those three areas. So if we
Mhm.
can relate each of our digital transformation or any of those other activities and things like that with those three terms, you will be like, the superstar. So that's what would be my
Yeah.
recommendation for the young
No,
generation.
very good. Very. It's actually a unique recommendation as well. There are a lot of good recommendations here, but I love that. Like, just learn, get your hands dirty, learn as much as possible, but make the connection between what you're doing to the company financials, so you can speak the business language. So
Correct.
this was a great recommendation and an advice. Steve, thank you very much for a good
Thank
conversation. I know we issued a little bit of an internet disruption, but I'm sure our marketing team will take care of it by cutting it the right places. Thank you for valuable insights.
Okay. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Bye.